60 pounds. That's all it was. 60 pounds worth of drugs. For that amount, a mother of a 12-year-old boy would be hunted down like an animal, run over by a car deliberately mounted onto a pavement, thrown 30 feet through the air, left dying on a cold Blackburn street. And the person who gave up her location? Someone she called a friend. This is the tragic story of Alison McBlain, a woman battling addiction who made one desperate decision that set off a chain of events ending in murder. A story about how the drug world operates without mercy, where 60 pounds matters more than a human life, where friendship means nothing when addiction and revenge collide, betrayal, violence, and a shopping receipt that would solve the case. She trusted a friend. That trust cost her everything. How does a 60-pound debt lead to murder? How does someone betray a friend for drugs? And what does this tragedy tell us about the devastating reality of addiction and the criminal networks that exploit it? But before we reveal how friendship became fatal and how investigators pieced together this heartbreaking case, if you're moved by true crime stories that show the real human cost of drugs and violence, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because what happened to Alison McBlain is a story that needs to be told. The Desperate Robbery, November 18th, 2019. November 18th, 2019. A cold Monday night in Blackburn, Lancashire. Winter settling in, streets quiet. Most people at home where it's warm and safe. But Alison McBlain and Christian Rivers aren't most people. They're battling addiction. And addiction doesn't care about the weather or the time or what's safe. Alison was 36 years old, a mother to a 12-year-old son, struggling with drug dependency that had taken over her life, fighting battles most people can't imagine. Christian Rivers was 28, Alison's partner, also caught in the grip of addiction, also struggling to survive day by day. That Monday night, they needed drugs, but they didn't have the 60 pounds to pay for them, and so they came up with a plan, a desperate, reckless plan that would set everything in motion. They decided to rob their dealer, just take the drugs and run. 60 pounds saved, problem solved. At least that's what they thought. The dealer was part of a local organized crime network known on the streets as the Bully Line. A drug operation run by a 26-year-old man named John Chatwood. Not the kind of people you want to cross, not the kind of organization that forgives or forgets. Alison and Christian talked it through and committed to the plan. They walked into a nearby shop and used a payphone to place their order. 60 pounds worth of drugs, standard transaction. Nothing unusual about the call. Moments later, the gang's runner arrived. His name was Caleb Connolly, 19 years old, young but already deeply involved in the drug trade. He pulled up with the product, expecting a normal exchange. Money for drugs, business as usual. But Alison and Christian acted fast. They seized the drugs from Connolly by force and fled the scene, running into the night with 60 pounds worth of product they hadn't paid for. For a moment, they probably felt clever. Felt like they'd beaten the system. Got what they needed without paying. Solved their immediate problem. They thought they'd gotten away with it. They were catastrophically wrong. News of the robbery reached John Chatwood almost immediately. The streets talk fast. Word spreads, and Chatwood was furious. But here's what Alison and Christian didn't understand. This wasn't just about 60 pounds worth of drugs. This wasn't about the money or the product. It was about respect, reputation, control. In the drug world, if you let someone rob you and get away with it, you look weak. Other people start thinking they can do the same. Your reputation crumbles. Your control slips. Your business falls apart. Chatwood couldn't let this slide. Not if he wanted to maintain his position. Not if he wanted to keep his operation running. This wasn't business anymore. It was personal. It was about sending a message. Caleb Connolly felt the same. He'd been the one robbed, humiliated right there on the street, made to look like a fool. He wanted revenge just as badly as Chatwood did. And so, the hunt began. For 60 pounds, Alison McBlain and Christian Rivers had made enemies who wouldn't forget, who wouldn't forgive, who would come looking for them. And when they came, there would be no mercy. The Betrayal, November 19th, 2019. The following evening, Tuesday, November 19th, just one day after the robbery, Alison needed to pick up her methadone prescription from a local pharmacy. Methadone is used to help people manage opioid addiction, a legal substitute prescribed by doctors to help addicts function and hopefully recover. For a short while, Alison and Christian split up. Christian stayed nearby while Alison made her way to the chemist to collect her prescription. Just a normal errand. Nothing unusual. Nothing that should have been dangerous. Outside the pharmacy, Alison unexpectedly bumped into someone. A friend. Someone she knew and trusted. Karis Point. The two women chatted briefly. Just small talk on the surface. Two friends catching up. Normal conversation. Nothing that seemed wrong or unusual. But underneath that friendly conversation, Karis Point knew far more than she was letting on. Word of the robbery had already spread through Blackburn's drug community. Everyone knew about it. Everyone was talking about the couple who'd robbed the bully line. And Karis knew about the reward being offered. Drugs or cash in exchange for information about Alison and Christian's whereabouts. A bounty on their heads placed by people who wanted revenge. Karis Point was also battling addiction. Also struggling. Also desperate for her next fix. And standing there outside that pharmacy, talking to Alison like everything was normal, Karis faced a choice. Friendship or temptation. Loyalty or drugs. Temptation won. The moment Alison left, the moment she walked away thinking everything was fine, Karis made her move. CCTV footage from inside the pharmacy captured what happened next. Captured the moment of betrayal in stark, undeniable detail. The camera shows Karis picking up the phone inside the pharmacy, dialing a number, making a call. She was calling the bully line, giving up Alison's location, telling them exactly where to find her. Then the footage shows something even more chilling. Karis standing in the doorway of the pharmacy, watching, looking out at the street, watching as Alison McBlain walked away, completely unaware that the friend she'd just spoken to had sealed her fate. Unaware that a call had been made. Unaware that people were coming for her. The person who betrayed her was someone she trusted. Someone she considered a friend. Someone who chose drugs over loyalty. Over humanity. Over basic decency. This was the call the gang had been waiting for. The information they needed. The location that would let them carry out their revenge. What happened next was brutal, calculated, and absolutely devastating. The call was made, the gang was coming, and Alison McBlain had minutes left to live. The attack, the car as weapon. The moment Caleb Connolly got that call from Karis Point, the gang mobilized. No hesitation, no debate, just immediate action. Connolly jumped into the driver's seat of a Fiat Punto. He was joined by three others: Dean Kieram, Joshua Titterington, and a 16-year-old boy whose youth didn't stop him from participating in what was about to happen. 4 people in a car, hunting 2 people over 60 pounds worth of drugs. Their destination was set. They knew exactly where Alison was. Karis had given them everything they needed. By this point, Alison had reunited with Christian Rivers. The two were walking together along a Blackburn street, probably heading home, probably talking about normal things, maybe relieved that Alison had gotten her prescription. Completely unaware of the danger closing in on them, Caleb Connolly drove through the streets until he spotted them. There they were, walking together, easy targets. And then, he did something chilling. Something that shows this wasn't an accident or a moment of anger. This was calculated, deliberate, planned. He turned off the car's headlights. Complete darkness. No warning. No chance for them to see what was coming. Then he accelerated. Hard. Fast. The Fiat Punto racing forward like a weapon. He mounted the pavement, aimed directly at Alison and Christian, and struck them with devastating force. The impact threw both of them into the air, their bodies lifted and hurled like they weighed nothing, then crashing back down to the hard ground. Christian Rivers somehow managed to get back on his feet despite suffering serious injuries to his hands and feet. Bones broken, flesh torn, pain shooting through his body. Disoriented, bleeding, confused about what had just happened. He looked around desperately for Alison. Where was she? Was she okay? Then he saw her. Alison was lying motionless on the ground. She'd been thrown nearly 30 feet from the point of impact. 30 feet. That's the length of a bus. That's how hard she was hit. Witnesses who'd seen the attack rushed over to help. Ordinary people trying to do the right thing, trying to help two victims of a horrific crime. One man approached Alison's body. Christian stood there looking at her. Looking at this man he didn't know, trying to help the woman he loved. And then Christian made a choice that would haunt him. A choice born of fear and self-preservation, and the reality of being involved in the drug world. He looked at the bystander and said words that capture the tragedy of this whole situation. "Look after her, I can't hang around." Then he staggered away into the night, leaving Alison lying there with strangers, going to a nearby takeaway to hide, to avoid talking to anyone, especially the police, because that's what the drug world does to people. It makes them choose survival over loyalty, makes them run when they should stay, makes them abandon the people they love because they're too scared of the consequences. Alison McBlain lay dying on that street, not with her partner, not with family, with strangers who tried their best to help. Police and paramedics arrived to find her in what first responders described as a catastrophic condition. More than 20 separate injuries across her body, bones shattered, internal damage, trauma that would challenge any medical team. They worked desperately at the scene before rushing her to the Royal Blackburn Hospital. She was placed in critical care, machines keeping her alive, doctors fighting to save her. Meanwhile, the gang fled. Caleb Connolly drove away from the scene with his 3 passengers. They drove about a mile to a secluded alleyway and abandoned the Fiat Punto. Then they scattered, each running off in different directions into the darkness. Within 30 minutes, they'd regrouped at John Chatwood's house, the gang leader's place, where they discussed what had just happened and quickly agreed on one thing. The car had to be destroyed. Evidence had to be eliminated. Nothing could connect them to what they'd just done. Connolly and another member returned to where they'd left the Fiat Punto. They set fire to the interior, watched as flames consumed the vehicle, watched smoke rise into the night sky. Then they fled again into the darkness, thinking they'd covered their tracks, thinking they'd destroyed the evidence, thinking they'd gotten away with it. They thought they'd destroyed the evidence. They hadn't. And that mistake would bring them all down. A mother was fighting for her life in hospital. A gang was thinking they'd gotten away with murder. And investigators were about to show them how wrong they were. The investigation, evidence from ashes. Police were already hunting for the vehicle involved in the hit and run. After reviewing CCTV footage from the scene, investigators quickly realized something crucial. This wasn't a random accident. This wasn't a drunk driver or someone who lost control. This was deliberate, targeted, calculated. The car had mounted the pavement. The headlights had been turned off. This was an attack. This was attempted murder. Then came the breakthrough that would crack the entire case. A patrolling traffic officer was driving through the area when he spotted something in a narrow alleyway. Smoke. Rising from a vehicle about a mile from where the attack had taken place. The flames had mostly died down, but the car was still smoldering. Still smoking. Evidence of a recent fire. The officer acted quickly. He began extinguishing the remaining flames, making sure the fire was completely out, securing the scene. And that's when he realized what the gang hadn't, what they'd failed to understand in their panic and their rush to destroy evidence. They hadn't destroyed everything. Inside the burnt-out Fiat Punto, in the footwell where the flames hadn't reached completely, investigators found something. Something small but absolutely crucial. A partially intact shopping receipt. And a chocolate wrapper. The receipt was scorched and damaged, but it was still readable. It revealed the store name, the time of purchase, and the location. This was the breakthrough the investigation needed. Using CCTV from cameras around the area where the car was abandoned, detectives began tracing the gang's movements backwards, following them through the streets, watching them flee the burning car. The route led them directly to a specific address, John Chatwood's house. The gang leader, the one who'd ordered the revenge attack. By the next morning, Chatwood was in handcuffs. The first member of the group to be arrested. But they didn't stop there. Following the lead from that shopping receipt, officers went to the pound stretcher store where the purchase had been made. They requested the CCTV footage from that location, and there it was. Absolute gold. The footage showed Caleb Connolly getting out of the driver's side of the Fiat Punto, wearing the same clothes he'd been spotted in when dumping and burning the vehicle. The same person, the same car. Undeniable connection. The driver was identified. The front seat passenger was also quickly identified through a distinctive detail. He'd recently injured his foot and was on crutches. CCTV from the scene showed a man fleeing, hobbling away in the same manner, moving awkwardly because of his injury. Hospital records confirmed the match. Name, address. Everything they needed. Another arrest made. The rear seat passengers proved harder to identify. They required more detective work, more piecing together of fragments. Detectives worked with multiple agencies, including social services, to identify the final members. Bit by bit, lead by lead, connection by connection. Eventually, every single member of the gang was named, located, and arrested. John Chatwood, Caleb Connolly, Dean Kieram, Joshua Titterington, the 16-year-old boy. One by one, the net closed around them. But the most shocking betrayal was still to be revealed. The person whose phone call had made all of this possible. The death and the ultimate betrayal. While investigators were tracking down the gang, Alison McBlain was fighting for her life. She lay in the Royal Blackburn Hospital, hooked up to machines. Life support keeping her breathing, monitors tracking every heartbeat, doctors and nurses doing everything humanly possible to save her. But her injuries were too severe, too catastrophic. The damage was beyond what any medical team could repair. Alison McBlain, a devoted mother to a 12-year-old son, was pronounced dead. A life ended over 60 pounds and wounded pride. A mother taken from her child. A woman destroyed by the drug world she'd been trapped in. Her death transformed the case. This wasn't just assault anymore. This was murder. Not long after Alison's death, police received an anonymous phone call from a woman claiming to have information about the attack. She said she'd been with Alison moments before it happened, but she refused to give her name. She'd blocked her number. Detectives knew this call was important. They worked to persuade her to talk, to keep her on the line, to convince her to cooperate. Eventually, they succeeded. It was Karis Point, the friend from outside the pharmacy. Officers traced her location and went to her home. When they knocked on her door, Karis Point was arrested. The investigation uncovered her role in the events that led to Alison's death. She was the one who made the phone call. She was the one who gave up Alison's location. She was the one who betrayed her friend for drugs or cash from the bully line. Karis Point was 28 years old, also battling drug addiction, also struggling. But her struggle doesn't excuse what she did. Her addiction doesn't justify her betrayal. And then came the most disturbing detail of all. Karis attended Alison's funeral. She stood there with grieving family and friends. With Alison's young son who'd just lost his mother. With people mourning a woman they loved. And she said nothing. She hid the truth about her involvement. She pretended to grieve alongside everyone else. For weeks, she kept that secret, until finally being charged and remanded in custody. Meanwhile, Christian Rivers, Alison's partner and the second victim of the attack, was located by police. After some time, he agreed to cooperate with investigators. He helped piece together the final events of that night, helped build the case that would bring everyone to justice. She was betrayed by someone she called a friend, hunted by a gang over 60 pounds, run down like an animal on a street, and left to die with strangers. And the person who made it all possible stood at her funeral and said nothing. Justice. The trials came. The evidence was presented. The CCTV footage, the shopping receipt, the witness statements, the phone records, everything building an overwhelming case. Caleb Connolly, the 19-year-old driver who'd turned off the headlights and mounted the pavement, was convicted of murder. Sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 18 years. John Chatwood, The 26-year-old gang leader who'd ordered the revenge attack was convicted of murder. Sentenced to life with a minimum term of 17 years. Dean Kieram and Joshua Titterington, the passengers who'd participated in the hunt, were convicted of murder. Both sentenced to life with minimum terms. The 16-year-old boy, the youngest member of the gang, was also convicted and sentenced, though his youth was considered in the length of his sentence. In Karis Point, the 28-year-old woman who'd betrayed her friend was convicted of manslaughter, sentenced to 5 years in prison for her role in Alison's death. Justice was served. Everyone involved was held accountable. But no sentence brings Alison back. No prison term returns a mother to her 12-year-old son. No verdict undoes the tragedy of that November night. A family destroyed. A child left without his mother. All over 60 pounds worth of drugs. Justice was served. But at what cost? The bigger picture in closing. This case shows us the devastating reality of drug addiction and the criminal networks that exploit it. Alison and Christian were addicts struggling to survive. Their robbery wasn't malicious. It was desperate, born of addiction and poor judgment. But in the drug world, there's no understanding, no forgiveness, no mercy. Respect and reputation matter more than human life. 60 pounds became worth more than a woman's existence. For the bully line, it was about sending a message. Rob us, and this is what happens. The cost to the community is immeasurable. Fear, violence, broken families. Alison's son growing up without his mother. Christian living with survivors' guilt and trauma. The families of the gang members also destroyed. Everyone loses in the drug trade. There are no winners, only victims. And Karis Point, also an addict, also desperate. Her addiction doesn't excuse her betrayal, but it explains the desperation that drove her to it. She chose drugs over friendship, over humanity, and now she'll carry that choice for the rest of her life. The lesson about addiction: it destroys everyone it touches. Users, dealers, families, friends, entire communities. The lesson about loyalty: addiction can corrupt even the strongest bonds, can make people betray those they love. The lesson about revenge: 60 pounds doesn't justify taking a life. Nothing justifies what happened to Alison McBlain. A shopping receipt solved this case. A small piece of evidence that survived the flames. Shows how forensics and determined police work crack even the most violent crimes. But what drives someone to betray a friend? What level of desperation makes that seem acceptable? Those are questions worth asking. Questions that matter if we want to understand and prevent tragedies like this. Alison never had a chance to know she'd been betrayed. She walked away from that pharmacy thinking she'd just had a normal conversation with a friend. She had no idea a call had been made. No idea a car was coming. No idea she had minutes left to live. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the human cost of drugs and the reality of addiction, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to Dark Truth Files for more true crime documentaries that reveal the tragic consequences of the drug world. Drop a comment sharing your thoughts on this heartbreaking case. Share this video with someone who needs to understand the reality behind addiction and violence. Because some stories aren't just about crime. They're about the human cost, the lives destroyed, the families shattered. 60 pounds, a friendship, a mother's life. All gone in one brutal moment on a cold November night in Blackburn. Alison McBlain deserved better. Her son deserved to grow up with his mother. And no amount of drugs is worth what happened. Remember her name, remember her story, and remember that behind every statistic, every news headline, every crime report, there's a human being whose life mattered.